I'm Donnie, 32 years old. And last year my sister destroyed my marketing career with a single prank call to my boss. I lost everything, but somehow landed an even better position months later. Suddenly, the family who abandoned me during my struggle appeared with hands outstretched, expecting to cash in on my success. They had no idea what was coming. When I smiled and said, "Check your mailboxes," their faces turned ghost white. Before I tell you what they found, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that subscribe button and stick around to see how I finally stood up for myself after years of mistreatment. Growing up in Chicago with my younger sister Megan was an exercise in constantly feeling second best. From the moment she was born when I was just 2 years old, the dynamics in our household shifted dramatically. My parents, Barbara and Thomas, made it abundantly clear through their actions that Megan was the golden child, while I was merely an afterthought. In elementary school, my report cards full of A's would receive a distracted nod, while Megan's mix of B's and C's earned elaborate celebrations. When I won first place in the 5th grade science fair, my parents skipped the ceremony because Megan had a minor dance recital. The pattern continued throughout our childhood, creating a wound that deepened with each passing year. College was where the disparity became impossible to ignore. I worked 20 hours weekly at a local grocery store while maintaining a full course load, taking out loans to cover what my part-time job couldn't help. Meanwhile, Megan received full financial support from our parents, despite dropping out of 2 different programs within 3 semesters. They bought her a car after the first dropout, calling it encouragement to find her path. When I expressed frustration at the imbalance, I was labeled jealous and unsupportive. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at Horizon Marketing, a respected firm in downtown Chicago. This achievement, earned through my own merit and hard work, received little acknowledgement from my family. My father merely commented, "At least one of our kids is employed," as if my success was a fortunate accident rather than the result of years of dedication. The pattern of Megan taking or destroying my possessions continued well into adulthood. When I saved for 6 months to buy my first professional camera, Megan borrowed it for a weekend trip and returned it with a cracked lens. It was already damaged, she claimed. Despite the camera being practically new, my parents suggested I should have gotten insurance rather than holding Megan accountable. On my 25th birthday, I arrived home to find my apartment door unlocked. Inside, Megan was trying on my best suit, the one I had purchased for important client meetings. When I objected, she laughed and said she needed it for a job interview. She returned it a week later, stained and reeking of cigarette smoke. My parents' response? "She's trying to get her life together. You should be more supportive." The incidents accumulated like tiny paper cuts to my dignity. Megan wrecked my first car by taking it without permission and rear-ending someone at a stoplight. Rather than holding her responsible, my parents suggested I should have known better than to tempt her by having a nicer vehicle than hers. Each Christmas and birthday, I'd spend weeks selecting thoughtful gifts for my parents, only to have Megan claim she had picked them out or, worse, present identical items and receive effusive thanks, while my contributions were barely acknowledged. My dating life suffered under Megan's influence as well. She developed an uncanny ability to sabotage my relationships through various tactics, telling embarrassing childhood stories at inappropriate moments, accidentally spilling drinks on my dates, or even spreading rumors about me to women I was seeing. One particularly painful instance involved my college girlfriend, Amanda, who Megan convinced I was cheating after showing her doctored text messages. Our extended family followed my parents' lead in their treatment of me. At family gatherings, aunts and uncles would fawn over Megan's latest endeavors, while asking me surface-level questions about my little marketing job. My cousin Patrick once asked if I had considered a real career like law or medicine, despite the fact that I had recently been promoted and was managing accounts for several major clients. Despite this treatment, I continued seeking my family's approval. Each success I achieved was presented to them like an offering, hoping for the validation I'd been denied throughout my life. When I closed my first major account, I called my parents immediately, only to have the conversation redirected to Megan's new apartment. Within minutes, the toxic dynamic became glaringly apparent to Jessica, whom I started dating about 3 years ago. After her first dinner with my family, she sat silently in the car before asking, "Do they always treat you like that?" Her outside perspective made it impossible to ignore what I had normalized for years. Jessica witnessed my parents interrupting me mid-sentence, Megan mockingly mimicking my expressions, and the general atmosphere of dismissal that surrounded me at family gatherings. Despite these challenges, my career was thriving. I had worked my way up at Horizon Marketing through consistent performance and dedication. By my 6th year, I was managing a team of 4 and handling some of our highest profile clients. My boss, Michael, had hinted at a potential promotion to Senior Account Director, a position that would represent a significant jump in both responsibility and compensation. This professional success became my refuge from family disappointment. I poured myself into work, finding the recognition and respect there that was absent at home. Little did I know that even this sanctuary would be targeted by Megan's jealousy and my family's indifference to her destructive behavior. The week before everything fell apart had actually been one of my best at Horizon Marketing. I had just landed the Peterson account, a national retail chain that represented millions in potential revenue for our agency. Michael had called me into his office on Friday afternoon to personally congratulate me, mentioning that this success had sealed the deal regarding my promotion to Senior Account Director. I made the mistake of sharing this news during Sunday dinner at my parents' house. My father nodded distractedly, while my mother said, "That's nice, dear," before immediately turning to Megan to ask about her latest temporary job at a boutique. What I didn't realize was that Megan had overheard my parents discussing my potential promotion later that evening. I learned this much later from my cousin Rebecca, who witnessed Megan's reaction. A scowl, followed by the ominous statement, "We'll see about that." Monday morning, I arrived at work energized and focused. By Wednesday, my life had imploded. I later pieced together what happened through security footage and a sympathetic IT colleague. Megan had meticulously planned her prank. She downloaded a voice-changing app that allowed her to sound like a man similar to my age and pitch. She researched our agency's main client competitors to make her call convincing. Most disturbingly, she practiced what she would say, as evident from the notes found later on her laptop. At 10:37 a.m. on Tuesday, she called Michael directly, using information from the company website. Disguising her voice to sound like mine, she launched into an offensive tirade, claiming to be drunk in the middle of the workday. She told Michael that I was planning to steal the Peterson account to a competitor agency where I had secretly interviewed. She added numerous offensive comments about Michael's leadership and made inappropriate remarks about female colleagues. Michael immediately called me into his office upon receiving this call. His face was ashen as he played a recording from his phone's automatic call recorder. I listened in horror to what sounded disturbingly like my voice spewing vile comments and betrayal. "That's not me," I insisted, feeling cold panic spread through my body. "I would never say those things. I don't even sound like that. The caller ID showed your personal cell number," Michael countered, showing me his phone log. Somehow, Megan had spoofed my number, a detail that made my defense seem even less credible. "Someone is impersonating me," I pleaded. "This has to be some kind of sabotage." Michael's expression hardened. "Donnie, we have a zero-tolerance policy for this kind of behavior. I've already spoken with HR. I'm sorry, but we're terminating your employment effective immediately." The meeting with HR was brief and humiliating. Despite my increasingly desperate explanations, the evidence against me seemed overwhelming. The phone number, the voice similarity, and the insider knowledge the caller had about our clients. Security escorted me from the building while colleagues watched in shock. I wasn't even allowed to collect personal items from my desk. They were mailed to me later, in a cardboard box. That evening, I received a text from James, our IT specialist. "Check your email. I believe you." The message contained security footage showing that I was in a client meeting during the exact time of the call, plus technical information suggesting number spoofing. Unfortunately, James wasn't high enough in the company hierarchy for his support to matter. And by then, the decision had been made. I confronted Megan the next day, driving straight to her apartment with the evidence James had provided. When I showed her the timestamps and technical details, her response chilled me. She laughed, not a nervous laugh of denial, but the amused chuckle of someone who got exactly the reaction they wanted. "It was just a joke," she said, rolling her eyes. "Not my fault your boss can't take one. Maybe, if you weren't such a boring workaholic, you wouldn't be so easy to mess with." Stunned by her casual cruelty, I went to my parents, certain they would finally see Megan's behavior for what it was. I was wrong. My mother sighed heavily when I showed them the evidence. "You two have always been competitive. I'm sure she didn't mean any real harm." My father was even more dismissive. "Companies don't fire valuable employees over one phone call. There must have been other issues they weren't telling you about." Their response was the final betrayal. Not only would they not hold Megan accountable, but they were also suggesting that I somehow deserved what happened. When I left their house that day, something fundamental had changed in my understanding of my family. The following weeks were a rapid descent into financial instability. I had some savings, but Chicago's cost of living quickly depleted them. Job applications went unanswered as word spread through the industry grapevine about my unprofessional conduct. I later learned that Michael had shared the recording with several colleagues at other agencies as a cautionary tale about entitled millennials. Jessica was my rock during this period. She never doubted my version of events and offered both emotional and practical support. She helped me revise my resume, practiced interview questions with me, and even offered to help with rent, which my pride initially prevented me from accepting. Meanwhile, my family's attitude toward my unemployment ranged from indifferent to mocking. Megan would casually ask, "Found a job yet?" with a smirk whenever we crossed paths. My mother suggested I might not be cut out for the corporate world, and perhaps should consider something less demanding. My father repeatedly mentioned his friend's son, who was hiring at his landscaping business, despite my marketing education and years of professional experience. The contrast between Jessica's unwavering support and my family's callous disregard crystallized the toxic nature of these relationships. Yet even then, some childlike part of me held out hope that they would eventually recognize the injustice and offer the support I desperately needed. As weeks turned into months, my financial situation became increasingly dire. I sold my gaming console, then my grandfather's watch, and finally my car, just to make rent payments. Each possession I parted with felt like another piece of my former life slipping away. The constant rejection from potential employers wore on my self-esteem, until I began questioning my own abilities. One particularly low evening, I sat at our kitchen table, surrounded by past due notices, calculating how many more weeks I could survive before complete financial collapse. Jessica found me there, staring blankly at the numbers that refused to add up to anything but disaster. "Let me help," she said simply, placing her hand over mine. "I can't take your money," I insisted, the words catching in my throat. "It's not charity, Donnie. It's what people do when they care about each other," she replied. "When I was struggling through nursing school, you helped me without hesitation. Why is it so hard to accept the same from me?" Her logic was irrefutable, but accepting help meant acknowledging how desperate my situation had become. Eventually, necessity overcame pride, and I accepted her offer to cover half of the rent temporarily. This compromise allowed me to preserve some dignity while preventing immediate homelessness. In stark contrast to Jessica's generosity, my family not only refused assistance, but seemed to take pleasure in my downfall. When I reluctantly asked my parents for a small loan to tide me over, my father lectured me about financial responsibility, while Megan sat in the background, smirking. This was the same Megan who had received thousands of dollars from them over the years for various failed ventures and emergencies of her own creation. The lowest point came during a family dinner I attended, only because Jessica thought maintaining connections might lead to job opportunities. Megan arrived late, excitedly showing off expensive new designer boots and a handbag. When my mother complimented her purchases, Megan casually mentioned they were retail therapy after a stressful day at her part-time retail job, the same job she frequently called in sick to, according to a mutual friend who worked there. How nice that some people can afford luxury shopping, I commented quietly. The bitterness, impossible to contain. Maybe if you hadn't gotten yourself fired, you could too, Megan shot back. While my parents exchanged uncomfortable glances but said nothing to defend me. That dinner was a turning point. I realized expecting support or fairness from my family was not only futile, but self-destructive. I needed to focus entirely on rebuilding my career without the emotional drain of their toxic presence. The following week, I expanded my job search beyond the major agencies where Michael's influence might reach. I applied to smaller boutique firms, in-house marketing departments, and even freelance opportunities. Among these applications was one to Vertex Creative, a small but growing agency specializing in digital marketing for medium-sized businesses. Their founder and creative director, Sarah, personally conducted my interview. When she asked why I'd left Horizon, I took a risk and told her the unvarnished truth, including the evidence James had provided. I expected skepticism, but instead found understanding. That sounds horrific, she said, genuine sympathy in her voice. And unfortunately, not unbelievable. I worked with Michael at Redline about 8 years ago. His ego is legendary, and his judgment of character is questionable at best. She offered me a position that same day. The salary was significantly lower than my previous role, and the title of marketing specialist was technically a demotion, but it was an opportunity to rebuild. I accepted immediately. My first weeks at Vertex were challenging. The company lacked the resources and prestige of Horizon, and I had to readjust my expectations and working style. Yet there was something refreshing about the smaller, more collaborative environment. Ideas were judged on merit rather than who proposed them, and Sarah fostered a culture of innovation that larger agencies often claimed to value but rarely practiced. I threw myself into the work with renewed determination. If my professional reputation had been tarnished through no fault of my own, I would rebuild it through exceptional performance and results. I stayed late, volunteered for challenging projects, and contributed ideas beyond my assigned tasks. 3 months in, I developed a social media strategy for a struggling local restaurant chain that increased their foot traffic by 37% within weeks. The client specifically requested me for their next campaign, and others soon followed suit. My colleagues, initially wary of the new hire with the mysterious past, began seeking my input on their own projects, Sarah noticed. 6 months after hiring me, she called me into her office. When I brought you on, I took a chance based on instinct, she said. That instinct has paid off better than I anticipated. I'd like to create a new position for you. Director of Digital Strategy. It comes with a team of 3 and a 40% salary increase. The new role not only restored my previous income level, but exceeded it. The validation of my abilities felt even more valuable than the financial relief. With the increased salary, I moved from my cramped apartment to a modern one-bedroom in a trendy neighborhood, complete with a home office space and building amenities I'd previously only dreamed about. My professional resurrection caught the attention of Marketing Weekly, which featured me in an article about digital innovation in smaller agencies. The piece praised my creative approaches and highlighted several successful campaigns I'd spearheaded at Vertex. It was this article that finally alerted my family to my changed circumstances. I hadn't completely cut contact with them during this period of rebuilding. but I had significantly limited our interactions, protecting my recovering self-esteem from their undermining comments. They knew I had found new employment, but assumed it was a lateral move at best, certainly nothing to rival my previous position. The growing confidence that came with professional recognition began to change my personal outlook as well. I no longer viewed myself through the distorted lens my family had installed. Jessica noted the difference one evening after I successfully presented a campaign to a particularly demanding client. "You stand taller now," she observed. "Not just physically, but in how you carry yourself. You're not waiting for approval anymore." She was right. Though I hadn't fully processed the damage my family had inflicted, I was beginning to build an identity separate from their validation. I was good at my job because of my talents and efforts, not because anyone in my family acknowledged it. This realization, simple as it sounds, was revolutionary. After decades of seeking external approval, this newfound self-assurance would soon be tested as my family discovered my improved circumstances and decided they deserved to benefit from them. The shift in my family's attitude was so sudden it might have been comical if it weren't so transparent. The first sign came in the form of a text message from Megan, who had barely communicated with me since the confrontation about her prank call. "Hey big bro, saw your article in Marketing Weekly. So proud of you. We should catch up soon. XOSO." This was followed by a call from my mother the same day, her voice unusually warm. "Donnie, darling, why didn't you tell us about your new position? Your father and I were just saying how we always knew you'd bounce back. We're so proud." Their pride had been noticeably absent during the months I struggled to pay rent and put food on the table. Now, with my name in a magazine and a comfortable salary restored, they were suddenly invested in my success. I agreed to Sunday dinner at their house, partly out of curiosity about this newfound attention, and partly because Jessica encouraged me to give them a chance. "People can change," she said optimistically. "Maybe they've realized how they've treated you." The dinner began pleasantly enough, with unusual interest in my work and projects. My father even pulled out a bottle of champagne to celebrate your comeback, as he put it. Megan was uncharacteristically attentive, laughing at my jokes and referring to inside stories from our childhood, as if we shared fond memories, rather than years of her torment. The facade began to crack during dessert, when my mother casually mentioned that Megan had an exciting new business opportunity. "I'm planning to open a boutique," Megan announced, as if continuing a conversation already in progress. "I've found the perfect location in Wicker Park, and I've already started designing the logo." "That sounds ambitious," I replied neutrally. "What's your business plan look like?" Megan waved her hand dismissively. "I'm still figuring out the boring details, but I was thinking, since you're doing so well now, you could help with the startup costs. It would only be about $50,000 to get things rolling properly." The request was so bold and presumptuous that for a moment I thought she was joking. The expectant looks around the table confirmed she was not. "That's a substantial investment," I said carefully, "especially for someone with no business experience or plan." "Oh, don't be so corporate," my mother interjected. "This is family, and you're doing so well now. It's time to give back a little." "Give back?" I repeated, the words tasting bitter. "Well, we've always supported you," my father added, apparently forgetting the recent months when they had done exactly the opposite. This was just the beginning. Over the following weeks, financial requests came from all directions. My parents needed $30,000 for home renovations they'd been putting off for years. My cousin Rachel expected a significant contribution to her destination wedding in Bali. Uncle Robert presented his failing hardware store as an investment opportunity. Aunt Susan began sending links to luxury resorts, hinting heavily about a family vacation I should fund. The frequency and boldness of these requests increased with each unanswered demand. Previously distant relatives found my phone number, each with their own financial emergency or opportunity that required my immediate attention. Second cousins I hadn't seen in years connected on social media, with thinly veiled requests disguised as catching up. The emotional manipulation became increasingly sophisticated. After all, "We've done for you" evolved into detailed revisionist histories where my parents had supposedly made great sacrifices for my education and career. We always believed in you contradicted their actual statements during my unemployment. Family helps family was deployed repeatedly. Despite the conspicuous absence of help when I had needed it most, Jessica witnessed this transformation with growing concern. After one particularly uncomfortable evening where my mother had spent an hour detailing their vacation plans that you'll obviously want to treat us to. Dear, Jessica confronted me in the car. They're using you, she stated flatly. This isn't normal family behavior. Maybe they're just trying to reconnect. In the only way they know how, I suggested. The remnants of my desire for family approval still lingering. Donnie. They showed up at your apartment, unannounced last week with a brochure for a timeshare. Your sister has told all her friends you're financing her boutique. Your parents are planning their retirement assuming your support. This isn't reconnection, it's exploitation. She was right. But acknowledging that truth meant accepting that my family viewed me as nothing more than a potential resource. The child in me still wanted to believe that somewhere beneath the manipulation was genuine love and pride. This internal conflict reached its peak when I overheard Megan on the phone at my parents' house, promising her friend a job at my brother's boutique, and describing how she would use his money to travel to Paris for merchandise. She hadn't even secured my investment, yet was already spending it, and claiming ownership of a business I would apparently fund, but not participate in. The most painful aspect was watching my parents encourage these expectations. They referred to Megan's non-existent boutique as if it were already established, discussed which room I would renovate first in their house, and planned a family cruise for the following summer, all without consulting me about my willingness to finance these ventures. I found myself in an impossible position. Continue allowing these assumptions, and eventually face the choice between financial ruin or disappointing everyone, or establish boundaries now, and risk the fragile reconnection with my family. The desire for their approval, ingrained since childhood, made the decision agonizing. Despite the obvious answer, Jessica watched this struggle with patience but growing concern. You deserve better than this, she reminded me gently. Real family supports each other through hardship, not just shows up for success. Her words resonated. But breaking lifelong patterns requires more than intellectual understanding. I needed something to finally snap me out of the emotional trap I'd been caught in for decades. That catalyst came during Thanksgiving dinner at my parents' house. The gathering included extended family, all of whom had recently discovered my financial recovery and developed sudden interest in my life. The meal began with the now familiar excessive attention and praise, each compliment feeling like bait on a hook. Midway through dinner, Megan tapped her glass with a spoon, calling for everyone's attention. I have an exciting announcement, she declared, her eyes briefly meeting mine with a triumphant glint. My boutique will be opening in February. The lease is signed, and contractors start renovations next week. A chorus of congratulations erupted around the table. My mother beamed with pride while my father nodded approvingly. Neither of them looked my way, though the implication of their support was clear. Donnie has generously agreed to finance the entire startup, Megan continued, now directly addressing me. Haven't you, big brother? The table turned to me expectantly. I sat frozen, ambushed by this public announcement of a commitment I had never made. I haven't agreed to anything, I finally said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table, broken by my father's forced laugh. Of course you have, son. We discussed this weeks ago. No, we didn't, I insisted. Megan asked. But I never agreed. Don't be difficult, Donnie, my mother interjected. You know how important this is to your sister. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I tried again, attempting to be diplomatic. I'm happy to give advice on her business plan, but I'm not in a position to fund an entire retail operation. Not in a position? Megan scoffed. Everyone knows how much you're making now. This is nothing to you. It's not about the amount, I explained. increasingly aware of the audience to this uncomfortable exchange. It's about making sound financial decisions, always the selfish one, my Aunt Susan muttered loudly enough for everyone to hear. Remember when he wouldn't share his toys as a child? Megan added, launching into an embarrassing story about me having a tantrum at age 4. Deliberately shifting the conversation to undermine my credibility. My parents laughed along with the story, seemingly relieved by the change in topic. Jessica, sitting beside me, reached for my hand under the table. A silent gesture of support. The remainder of the meal continued with similar jabs and embarrassing childhood anecdotes, each designed to portray me as selfish and difficult. My parents not only failed to defend me but actively participated, adding their own unflattering stories. Jessica was largely ignored throughout the evening, despite her attempts to engage in conversation. When she mentioned her recent promotion at the hospital, my mother barely acknowledged it before turning to ask Megan about her plans for the boutique's interior design. We left earlier than planned, the tension having reached an unbearable level. In the car, my phone immediately began buzzing with messages from my parents, demanding I apologize for ruining Thanksgiving and embarrassing your sister in front of everyone. That was one of the most toxic family dynamics I've ever witnessed, Jessica said quietly as we drove home. And I say that as someone who works in a hospital psychiatric unit. The following day, I met my best friend Ryan for coffee and recounted the Thanksgiving disaster. Unlike Jessica, who had only witnessed my family interactions for a few years, Ryan had known me since college and had seen the pattern develop over a decade. You keep hoping they'll suddenly become the family you deserve, he observed. But they've shown you consistently who they are. Maybe it's time to believe them. His words struck a chord. I had been operating under the assumption that my family's behavior was temporary or situational, that with the right approach or achievement, they would finally treat me with respect and fairness. The evidence suggested otherwise. That weekend, I scheduled an appointment with Dr. Sharon Lewis, a therapist I had briefly seen during my unemployment period. Our session focused on the concept of family entitlement and the patterns that enabled it. What would you say to a friend in your situation? Dr. Lewis asked after I described the Thanksgiving incident. I'd tell them they're being used, I admitted. That they deserve better treatment from people who claim to love them. And why is it difficult to apply that same standard to yourself? The question pierced through years of conditioning. Why indeed? The answer involved complex layers of childhood programming, the natural desire for parental approval, and the sunk cost of decades trying to earn love that should have been freely given. By the end of our session, I had reached a difficult but necessary conclusion. I needed to establish permanent boundaries with my family, regardless of the potential consequences to those relationships. Dr. Lewis helped me understand that my family's behavior was unlikely to change because it had always worked for them. Only by changing my response could I hope to break the cycle. Over the next 2 weeks, I developed a plan for establishing these boundaries in a clear, undeniable way. The first step involved collecting evidence of my sister's prank call and its aftermath. James, my former IT colleague, provided copies of the security footage and technical analysis. I obtained records of my employment termination and the financial hardship that followed. I also compiled documentation of each financial request made by family members since my career recovery, including text messages, emails, and recorded phone conversations, legal in my state with one-party consent. Alongside these, I gathered evidence of their refusals to help during my period of struggle, creating a stark contrast. With Ryan's help, I wrote individualized letters to each family member, detailing the truth of our relationship from my perspective. These weren't angry rants, but factual accounts of their behavior and its impact on me. I included specific incidents, dates, and direct quotes wherever possible, making it difficult to dismiss my experiences as misinterpretations. I consulted Amanda, a friend who practices family law, about any potential legal implications of my plan. While she assured me that nothing I intended was illegal, she advised documenting everything in case of future disputes. The final component involved preparing what I had begun thinking of as the mailbox surprise. For each family member, I created a package containing eins, a comprehensive letter detailing our relationship history; 2, documentary evidence of their behavior, including recordings and screenshots; 3, a record of any financial support I had provided them in the past; 4, for Megan specifically, evidence of her prank call and its devastating consequences; 5, a gift card with the exact cumulative dollar amount each person had ever given me as gifts or support. These packages represented both a reckoning with the past and a declaration of independence from their manipulation. The gift cards were particularly symbolic, returning their financial investment in me and thus nullifying any perceived debt. The opportunity to deliver these packages presented itself when my mother announced a family gathering to celebrate my father's birthday. The timing seemed appropriate for what would essentially be my declaration of independence from toxic family dynamics. As the date approached, I experienced a mixture of anxiety and resolve. Jessica's unwavering support strengthened my determination. Whatever happens, she assured me, you're doing the right thing for your well-being. I'm proud of you. The night before the gathering, I placed all the prepared packages in my car and tried to sleep, knowing the next day would permanently alter my family relationships, for better or worse. The morning of my father's birthday, I woke with a strange sense of calm. The anxiety that had built over the previous weeks had transformed into a quiet certainty. Today would be difficult, but necessary. Jessica and I had breakfast together before preparing to leave for my parents' house. She watched me carefully as I sipped my coffee, concern evident in her eyes. "Are you sure you want to do this today?" she asked. "It's your father's birthday. That's precisely why I need to do it now," I replied. "Everyone will be there, and they'll be on their best behavior initially. It gives me a chance to say what I need to say before the usual dynamics take over." She nodded, understanding my reasoning. "I'll be right beside you the whole time." "You don't have to do that," I said. "This could get ugly." "That's exactly why I'll be there," she responded firmly. "We're a team, remember?" Her support meant everything. Throughout my struggles, Jessica had been the one constant, demonstrating what genuine love and respect looked like. The contrast between her treatment and my family's only strengthened my resolve. We arrived at my parents' house precisely at noon, carrying a wrapped gift box for my father that contained a high-quality leather wallet. The real gifts, however, remained in the trunk of my car, waiting for the right moment. My parents greeted us with unusual warmth, my mother embracing me longer than necessary, while my father clapped me on the shoulder with exaggerated affection. Their eyes traveled immediately to my hands, noting the single gift I carried. "Just something small for the birthday boy," I said, answering their unspoken question. The house was already filled with extended family, many of whom had rarely attended family functions until news of my financial recovery spread. Aunt Susan and Uncle Robert held court in the living room, while cousins Patrick and Rachel clustered around the bar cart. Megan arrived fashionably late, making an entrance in an outfit that probably cost more than a month of my rent during my unemployment period. "Donnie!" she exclaimed, air kissing near my cheek. "I've been meaning to call you about the boutique. The contractor needs the first payment by Wednesday. We'll talk about that later," I responded neutrally, noting how she assumed my cooperation was inevitable. Dinner was a performance of family harmony, with everyone on their best behavior while simultaneously positioning themselves for their desired outcomes. My mother mentioned the home renovation 3 times. Uncle Robert described his store's financial challenges in detail. Cousin Rachel displayed her engagement ring prominently while discussing Bali wedding venues. I maintained a pleasant demeanor throughout, nodding at appropriate moments and deflecting direct financial requests with vague responses. Jessica squeezed my hand under the table whenever a particularly blatant attempt was made. As dessert was served, my father opened his gifts, exclaiming with rehearsed enthusiasm over each one. When he unwrapped my wallet, He nodded approvingly but couldn't quite hide his disappointment at its modest nature. Very nice, son. Very practical. I actually have something else for everyone, I announced, standing up. If you'll give me a moment, I retrieved the packages from my car, distributing an envelope to each family member. I've been reflecting on our relationships lately, I explained, as they looked curiously at the sealed envelopes, and I wanted to give each of you something personalized. How thoughtful, my mother murmured, clearly expecting something valuable inside. There's one more thing, I added. I've left something special in each of your mailboxes at home. Something that represents our relationship. Our mailboxes? Aunt Susan questioned. Yes. I'd suggest checking them when you get home. It's important. My cryptic announcement created a buzz of excitement. Megan immediately pulled out her phone, presumably to ask her roommate to check her mailbox. Others exchanged curious glances, likely assuming I had arranged deliveries of expensive gifts. Can we open these now? My father asked, holding up his envelope. I'd prefer if everyone opened them privately, I replied. They contain personal messages. This request was ignored, as everyone tore into their envelopes, expecting gift cards or checks. Instead, they found brief notes explaining that the contents of their mailboxes would provide clarity about our relationship going forward. The mood shifted perceptibly as they realized no immediate financial reward was forthcoming. Conversation resumed, though with less enthusiasm. While several family members made excuses to leave early, undoubtedly rushing home to check their mailboxes, Megan received a text that caused her face to pale. What is this? She demanded, holding up her phone to show me a photo of her opened package. The truth, I replied simply. She stormed out without another word, followed by confused looks from the remaining family members. Within 30 minutes, my parents' phones began ringing incessantly as relatives discovered their own packages. My father disappeared into his office to take a call, while my mother's expression hardened as she listened to what was undoubtedly an outraged family member on the other end of the line. What have you done? She asked after hanging up, her voice cold. I've established boundaries, I answered calmly. Each package contains documentation of my relationship with that person, including how they treated me during my unemployment and their financial demands after my recovery. You recorded private conversations? My father asked incredulously, returning from his office. In this state, only one party needs to consent to recording, I informed him. But that's hardly the point. The content of those conversations is what matters. This is about Megan's boutique, isn't it? My mother accused. You're punishing everyone because you don't want to help your sister. This is about years of mistreatment, I corrected her. The boutique is just the latest example. I stood up, Jessica following suit. Each of you has received evidence of your own behavior. Megan's package includes proof that she made the call that got me fired. Yours includes documentation of how you dismissed that fact and refused to help me when I needed it most. Everyone else has similar evidence specific to them. This is ridiculous, my father sputtered. We're family. Family should support each other. I agreed. But that support has only ever flowed in one direction. I'm simply making that fact impossible to ignore or deny. What do you want from us? My mother asked, tears forming in her eyes that I recognized as tactical rather than genuine. Nothing, I answered honestly. That's the point. I don't want or need anything from any of you anymore. The gift cards in your packages represent the exact amount each of you has ever given me. Your investment has been returned, and our accounts are settled. You can't just erase family, my father insisted. I'm not erasing anything. I'm acknowledging what already exists. Our relationship has always been conditional and transactional. I'm simply declining to participate in those terms any longer. With that, Jessica and I walked toward the door. My parents followed, shifting rapidly between anger, bargaining, and attempts at guilt. You need to retract all this, my father demanded. Call everyone and tell them it was a mistake. Think about family harmony, my mother pleaded. Think about how this makes us look. I've spent my entire life thinking about everyone else's feelings and needs, I replied. It's time I considered my own. As we stepped outside, my phone began buzzing continuously, with messages from various family members, ranging from outrage to defensive justifications, to accusations of betrayal. I silenced it without reading them. Are you okay? Jessica asked as we drove away. I think I will be, I answered, feeling a weight lifting despite the confrontation. For the first time in my life, I'm not waiting for their approval or validation. It's terrifying and liberating at the same time. She took my hand. I'm proud of you. That took incredible courage. Looking back at my parents' house, growing smaller in the rearview mirror, I realized I had finally released the desperate hope that they would become the family I needed. Instead, I had chosen to acknowledge reality and build a life based on genuine connections rather than obligation and manipulation. The immediate aftermath of what my family now refers to as the mailbox incident was a tsunami of angry messages, tearful voicemails, and outraged social media posts. Megan led the charge, painting herself as the victim of a vengeful brother who couldn't take a joke. My parents alternated between demanding I apologize and attempting to minimize my concerns, never acknowledging their role in the family dynamic. After 3 days of this onslaught, I made the difficult decision to temporarily block all family contacts. This wasn't done out of spite, but as a necessary step for my mental health. I needed space to process the aftermath without constant attempts to pull me back into old patterns. Jessica supported this decision, helping me filter essential communications while blocking the toxic ones. My friend Ryan invited us to his lake house for a weekend away from the chaos, providing a peaceful environment to decompress and reflect. These genuine connections highlighted what had been missing from my family relationships: reciprocity, respect, and unconditional support. Upon returning to Chicago, I focused on creating stability in my new reality. I accelerated my apartment search, finding a secure building with an unlisted address to prevent unwanted visits. The move was both physically and symbolically significant, representing a fresh start, uncontaminated by past dynamics. Professional success continued to be a source of strength during this transition. Sarah at Vertex gave me increasing responsibility, eventually promoting me to Chief Strategy Officer with a substantial salary increase. My work became more innovative as I freed myself from the emotional baggage that had previously consumed so much mental energy. Throughout this period, I continued therapy with Dr. Lewis, processing the grief that inevitably accompanied setting boundaries with family. What you're experiencing is similar to bereavement, she explained during one session. You're mourning the family you deserved, but never had. This framework helped me understand the waves of sadness that occasionally washed over me despite knowing I'd made the right decision. I wasn't grieving the actual relationships I'd limited, but rather the idealized versions I'd spent decades hoping they would become. Jessica and I built new traditions to replace family obligations. We hosted Friendsgiving with colleagues and neighbors, celebrated holidays with her family, who welcomed me warmly, and created weekend rituals that became the foundation of our shared life. These connections, based on mutual respect and genuine affection, filled the void left by family estrangement more completely than I could have anticipated. About 6 months after the confrontation, I received a notification that someone from my extended family had viewed my LinkedIn profile. This indirect contact led me to discover the narrative they had constructed about our estrangement. Through mutual connections, I learned that Megan portrayed herself as bewildered by my sudden hostility, claiming my success had changed me. My parents described themselves as heartbroken, unable to understand why their son had turned against the family. This revisionist history was predictable, but still painful. The truth, documented in the packages I delivered, was conveniently ignored in favor of a story that preserved their self-image as loving, supportive family members blindsided by my inexplicable cruelty. Around the 1-year mark, something unexpected happened. My cousin Rebecca reached out with a handwritten letter, delivered to my office rather than my home. Unlike the angry messages I'd received initially, her letter was thoughtful and introspective. "I've been reflecting on what you shared," she wrote. At first, I was defensive and angry, but as time passed, I began to see patterns in our family I hadn't noticed before. I watched how they treated others and recognized the truth in what you documented. "I want you to know I'm sorry for my part in it, and I respect your decision to protect yourself." Rebecca's letter was the first of several genuine apologies that trickled in over time. Not everyone was capable of this reflection, but a few family members demonstrated growth and understanding. With these individuals, I cautiously rebuilt relationships on new, healthier terms, always maintaining clear boundaries about acceptable behavior. Megan never apologized. In fact, she doubled down on her narrative, occasionally using social media to make veiled references to toxic family members and ungrateful brothers. My parents made sporadic attempts at reconciliation, but these invariably included phrases like "put this behind us" and "move forward as a family" without any acknowledgement of the underlying issues. 18 months after the confrontation, my parents reached out through Jessica, perhaps hoping she would advocate for them. Their message included the first hint of recognition. "We may not have always been perfect parents, but we did our best." This limited acknowledgement, while falling far short of taking responsibility, represented their first step away from complete denial. I considered their overture carefully, consulting with Dr. Lewis about healthy ways to respond. "Perfect isn't the standard," she reminded me. "Acknowledging harm and showing willingness to change is." I responded with a brief message outlining what reconciliation would require: acknowledgement of specific behaviors, commitment to respecting boundaries, and participation in family therapy if we were to attempt rebuilding our relationship. My requirements were met with silence for several weeks before my mother replied that they would think about it, a response that spoke volumes about their readiness for genuine change. Meanwhile, my relationship with Jessica deepened. Our shared experience through the family confrontation had strengthened our bond in unexpected ways. She had seen me at my most vulnerable and stood beside me as I found my voice. 2 years after the mailbox incident, I proposed during a quiet moment at Ryan's lake house, the place that had provided sanctuary during the most turbulent period of my life. We planned a small wedding, inviting only those who had consistently shown respect and genuine care. This included Jessica's family, my friends Ryan and Amanda, colleagues from Vertex, and the few extended family members who had demonstrated growth and understanding. My parents and Megan were not invited, a decision that brought both sadness and relief. Rebecca attended, as did 2 cousins and an uncle who had made sincere efforts to understand and respect my boundaries. Their presence represented the possibility of healing and growth, even within difficult family systems. The day before our wedding, I received a card from my parents containing a brief note. "We realize now we may never fully understand each other, but we do love you in our way. We hope you find happiness." It wasn't the comprehensive acknowledgement I had once hoped for, but it represented a small step toward acceptance, if not understanding. As I reflect on this journey from desperate approval, seeking to self-respect, I recognize that the most valuable lesson wasn't about family betrayal, but about personal worth. For decades, I had measured my value through others' validation, particularly from those who were constitutionally incapable of providing it. Learning to locate my worth internally rather than externally was the true transformation. The relationships I now cultivate are built on mutual respect and genuine connection rather than obligation or manipulation. I've discovered that family can be chosen, created through bonds of authentic care, rather than merely biological connection. The people who surround me now see me clearly and value me completely, without conditions or expectations. This doesn't mean the journey has been without pain, there are still moments of grief for what might have been, particularly during traditional family milestones. But these moments no longer define me or determine my actions. I've learned that boundaries aren't walls, but rather defining lines that protect what's precious. Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with family members who couldn't respect your success or personal growth? How did you handle the inevitable guilt and second-guessing that comes with standing up for yourself? Drop a comment below to share your experience. Your story might help someone else find the courage to value themselves. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about navigating complex relationships. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes the family we create brings more healing than the family we're born into.